Welcome to the WPAOG Podcast, brought to you by the Association of Graduates. Tune in as we continue our mission of making the Long Gray Line the most highly connected alumni body in the world. Reporting directly from the United States Military Academy at West Point, let's go Army!
Welcome to the very first episode of the brand new WPAOG Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lyons, class of 83, proud to be, and the major giving officer at the Association of Graduates, primarily for the state of Texas. Today, we will hear from the Career Services Department and learn about some of the ways they have been helping our alumni transition to the rapidly changing work environment, especially in the tech space. But before we get into some recent graduate success stories, we have a quick remark from our AOG President and CEO, Todd Browne.
My name is Todd Browne, class of 1985, President and CEO of the West Point Association of Graduates. Our 2030 strategic plan advances our alumni body's remarkable record of service to West Point and one another. Our vision is to become the most highly connected alumni body in the world. And we are proud to launch this new AOG podcast, expanding the existing connections between graduates with tailored communications accessible from anywhere in the world. This customized content channel offers an exclusive look at the extraordinary lives of our graduates while keeping you up to date on AOG projects, events, and happenings at our Rockbound Highland Home. If you would like to contribute to this podcast in any capacity, please email us at initiatives@wpaog.org. Thank you for listening as we unlock the power of the Long Gray Line.
Hi, this is Julia Ruddock, Director of Career Services and Class of 07 here at West Point AOG. I am very happy to have a chat today and really have the opportunity to dig in to one of our alum of the Career Transition Program, Anise Merzi, Class of 11, also the Product Manager currently over at Primer. Anise, I'm so very happy to have you during our AOG podcast and really excited to learn a little bit more about you, your transition, your story, and what you've been up to since you transitioned out. So, Anise, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your background and who you are, I'd really appreciate that.
No, thanks, Julia. Yeah, I really appreciate just being on. I see it more of an opportunity to just try to help others. And that's hopefully what everyone gets out of this today. And I'm always open if people want to reach out and ask for advice. You know, I'd love to help because it's definitely a hard uphill battle as you look at your transition. So there are people out there to help you. And, you know, the first stop shop kind of is the WPAOG state, you know, to hit that place up. And, you know, I reached out to Julia. It was great. But kind of to start, you know, a little bit about me, you know, my name's Anise Merzi. I was at the academy in the cadet company G2 for my freshman year and then finished at B4, go Buffs. I graduated in 2011 where I commissioned as a field artillery officer. I'm originally from Oceanside, California. And yeah, it's been a journey ever since. You know, I'm also from the prep school, if any prepsters are out there. So it's been a journey, you know, starting in 07 and finishing in 11. And like Julia mentioned, you know, I'm currently a product manager at a tech company called Primer.ai.
Well, you know, thanks for that a bit of insight, Anise, into your background and, you know, how you ended up at Primer. But kind of dialing back a little bit, how did you learn even about career services in the first place?
Yeah, I was lucky. I was actually back at West Point. And as I was getting ready to transition, a few colleagues of mine mentioned some of the services that I shouldn't discount as I was going through my process. And really, as I approached the transition, I was like, I might as well take advantage of everything and explore all the options because you never know when something's going to come through, right? And that's where I kind of searched on LinkedIn and saw Julia came up. So I reached out to her via, you know, an email message, and then, you know, the rest is history from there.
So when you reached out to us, Anise, you know, what were your expectations of career services, you know, given what you knew about it from, you know, fellow colleagues at the academy?
Yeah, I felt like I had a strong network inside of the military, but it was really bridging that gap to connecting with, you know, the Long Gray Line, as you put it, outside of the military, where I felt like I didn't really have that connection. And I was hoping that the career services would help kind of bridge that gap.
What frame of mind were you even in, or what were you thinking even, you know, as you kind of consider this job search and the road that was ahead of you, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I just networked like crazy. I knew from, I was on LinkedIn really like a year after I graduated, and I was in for almost 10 years.
I didn't even know that LinkedIn. Well, LinkedIn probably was okay. I forgot where you're 11 now. 7. I'm like, was LinkedIn around?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was still very new. And, I felt like just keeping that network up, you never know when you're going to transition, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or, or beyond. Everyone's going to transition at some point. Mm-hmm. So my mindset was like, I might as well start using this tool just to start building something, but it just wasn't, it wasn't enough. Right. I think when I finally got to the transition, I was like, yeah, I definitely need to keep networking, but there's other things like inside of our groups that we should take advantage of. And that's kind of where the West Point Alumni Services came up. And then also I did a skill bridge program. So again, just trying everything, right?
Okay.
I was like, I'm just going to try everything. Same thing when I was interviewing. Mm-hmm. I got past the point where instead of taking like a targeted approach, like, okay, let me just go after this company, this role, and see what happens. A lot of these companies, especially in tech, it takes 1 to 2 months to just go from start to finish. And some people don't have, like, pretend like what happened to me. You get to the end of the 2-month experience and they tell you, sorry, we went with someone else. Like, what do you do now? You fall flat and you start over.
Exactly.
Right. So I kind of changed my mentality around that, where I was like, you know what, I'm going to take every interview. I don't care if I'm doing like 3 interviews with 3 different companies in one day. You just have to have those backup plans, because you never know, especially during the coronavirus. Like, the opportunities were like very minimal, right? And then I was fighting against, especially in tech, I was fighting against companies that were doing layoffs, like Uber. Like, how do you compete with a person that was doing that same job at Uber now? And you're this random army guy, right? Like, I have technical background, and I have a lot of stuff on paper that translates compared to like a normal officer. But still, I was at a significant disadvantage, not just from, this army guy, but also you're competing against people that are already in that scene. Like, how do you stack up when a hiring manager is looking at risk, right? They're like, well, do I take a huge risk and take this army guy? Or do I take a smaller risk and go with this guy at Uber that had the same job title as what I'm looking for?
So if you don't mind actually sharing, as you're kind of, as you were looking, kind of getting into form with transition, what were or some of the biggest concerns that you had about transitioning out of the Army in the first place?
Yeah, so I guess the one that crosses everyone's mind is, am I going to have a job when I actually get out, right? So that was the first thing that I was really concerned with. And then that kind of got eased when I was thinking, well, everyone typically finds something. So then my next kind of fear was doing a job that I didn't really want to do for 1 or 2 years. So that was kind of the big one that was looming over my shoulder. Like, okay, now I feel comfortable at least getting a role, but is that the role that I want to do? Like, why get out of the military if I'm going to do something that I don't want to do?
So tell me then, dig in a little bit about Primer. Like, how did you actually arrive at Primer, given that you were doing all this networking, you said you did the Skills Bridge internship, dig into that a little bit to kind of share a little bit about what that experience was like, especially since you're transitioning into tech in that environment.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, I tell people like it was an uphill battle where the hill was like Mount Everest. And and no one, it's unfortunate, like how close we are, like I feel like with classmates and other grads where we share like a special bond. It's just like in the military where no one is going to help you as much as you help yourself. And you just have to go out there and get after it. Mm-hmm. There's people that will kind of reach down and put their hand out, but it's tough to find them, and you shouldn't just rely on that, right? You should kind of build in your own backup plans. And then if that does happen, kind of going into the Primer thing where someone in my network kind of shared this role when I was applying at other roles. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know what? This is when I changed my mentality. You know what? I'm just going to go for it. Worst case, I just have another option on the table. Okay. And we hit a lucky streak towards the end of my terminal leave where we ended up getting 3 offers on the table, which was huge because then it helps you negotiate now your package, right? Your salary package instead of like, hey, I'm just going to take it because I'm a month out now from getting out of the military. I do not want to be jobless. I want to know kind of what's next for our family, and I'll just take whatever you pay me. So now you have, I have this other option, right? So you can start going into the compensation negotiations, right?
Yeah. So the whole comp and salary negotiation, where did you learn how to do that? Was that something? Yeah, tell me, how did you even learn how to do that? Because it's perhaps the most daunting and intimidating conversation, especially if you're transitioning out of the Army for the first time and you've never had to negotiate your salary, because we're already on a trajectory in uniform, and you just kind of do and be about it and take care of your folks, and you should be good to go. So how was that experience?
Yeah, it was definitely a learning experience. I did some research on my own. There's also a program called Breakline. Again, going to that whole notion of just explore whatever the hell's out there. What's the worst case? Oh, I spent 2 or 3 days learning, but I didn't really learn too much. It's better than going back and saying what I've seen people getting out. Oh, I wish I would have just explored that one program. Now I spent 1 or 2 years in a job that I wasn't happy about. Now I am happy, but those 1 or 2 years was tough as I was trying to find my way. I wish I would have done a couple things before I got out.
So remind me again. So you did Breakline.
Breakline, SkillBridge.
Touched us. You started networking. When did you actually begin? Like, when did you legit start actively working on your transition? And that's from the first email or the first website you visited about transition to primer. So
probably 11 or 10 months out from transition is when I started really thinking about it, because I hit a crossroad where I was, I got a message from my career manager when I was at West Point saying like, hey, everyone, tell me if you're like, what's your next plans if you're in this new cycle? Because you know how everyone falls like in cycles.
Yeah.
Hey, I just want to let you know you fall in this cycle. I'm getting ready to submit your new stuff so you can like select your new location.
Yeah.
And I asked him, and this was in August, and I asked him like, oh shoot, I'm still on the fence. I'm not sure what we want to do as a family.
Yeah.
If we want to stay at West Point for 1 more year, then leave after 2 years being at West Point. So we were at like that halfway, I guess, on the fence, and we're like, shoot, when do I need to let you know? And he's like, well, you need to let me know as soon as possible. So we thought about it pretty hard over the summer when I was doing like the summer training detail for like Land Nav with the cadets. And we finally made a decision, let's just call it. And I didn't actually start doing anything then because I was still far out. I didn't get out until December 2020. So this was August 2019. Yeah, 2019. So this was almost a year and a half where we knew we were pretty much getting out, but I didn't actively start doing anything till maybe like 11 or 10 months out.
Gotcha. And thanks for answering that. And you mentioned family, which for maybe at least half of us, that's going to be, a key component of your decision making, not only in terms of when you get out, but, what you do when you get out and so on. So I think it's a very important question to ask. What advice do you have for those with family who are looking at transitioning for the first time in your case? And again, it's an unknown environment. It's totally different from the military. You don't have that, that set salary that, everybody else makes. That comfort blanket is gone, quite frankly, if you're looking at that transition. But do you have any thoughts or just about with a family in tow trying to execute a transition, first time transition out?
Yeah.
What was going through your mind? And dig in a little bit.
Yeah, no, of course. Thanks for asking, Julia. Yeah, I mean, what I tell people like that I know that are either still serving or thinking of getting out, I just tell them, do what's best for you and your family. If that means staying in, like, why are you getting out?
Yeah,
like, don't do something that you're not entirely sold on what you want to do. We considered getting out for a long time, and we fought about it for forever.
Okay.
And it was tough because we were very comfortable with what we were doing. Like you said, it wasn't like I was being forced out. We were right on track. So it's one of those things where we just sat down as a family and we're like, hey, there's a decision point that's coming up. If we stay in after 10 years and move to our next location, it's almost stupid not to just finish, not to discount anyone that got out at like 12 years or whatever.
Of course.
Just in our like perspective, we as a family ran the numbers and thought it does not make sense. Like, what do you want to do? Talking with my wife, understanding that she wants to get back into her career. Like, how do we promise that if we stay in, and just kind of weighing those items, what's a deployment look like now that you have 2 kids, that age, it's just like, I don't know. So that was kind of our personal, again, it just goes back, long story short, like just do what's best for your family.
No, that's pretty sound advice. And, all of what you just mentioned a while ago, honestly, are things that every single one of us deal with, whether it's a spouse or maybe it's children or or just maybe other folks within your broader family that, regardless of what we think, needs of the family are always going to have an impact on how we go about or what our decision actually entails. So I really appreciate that. So let's fast forward a little bit. So we pivoted. We're in primer. Tell me about what that experience was like. Like first day of primer. Ooh, what was that about?
Yeah.
What's your experience been? I mean, does it meet your expectations and so on? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Skill Bridge program definitely helped with that because it was pretty normal at that point. It was a short Skill Bridge. I did, I think it was 2 months, and it was over at CrowdStrike. And I think that helped me prepare mentally for that transition because there was a lot of bumps that I hit when I was at CrowdStrike that those weren't problems. It was already mentally transitioned in my mind.
Got it.
That helped me do that. So I do recommend people to check out, the Skill Bridge program if they can. I do have some comments on the Skill Bridge program.
If you don't mind, yeah.
But really, I think it was just a great opportunity if you use it as kind of a way to shift your mindset of, hey, now you're moving into this tech world. People think differently. Organizations are laid out certain ways that you're not used to. Information flows. Everything's different than what you're used to. And just be comfortable with being uncomfortable, really, right? Like, just be open, vulnerable. Like, don't go in there thinking that you know everything. People are actually super helpful. Same thing in the military, right? Like with your NCOs or something. Like if you go in there as that lieutenant or whoever, the captain showing up to your first sergeant and just being like, I got this under control. I know how to do this. It's not going to bode well for you. So taking that same mentality outside, you have different counterparts or peers that you work with, just being vulnerable with them. Like, hey, this is obviously something new for me. I'm ready to like learn as much, what kind of helps you. And a lot of people would be surprised would at least send you a note and like, hey, you should check this out. Like read up on this. This is what I actually use for, my processes and procedures when I'm doing my job. Because it's not likely that you're going to go into a job where there's not someone that's pretty much doing similar things. So that's there's like a lot of other product managers at Primer that you can reach out to and just say like, yeah, we're not working on the same product, but there's a lot of commonalities like, whether it's tooling or just working with, technical people and being able to understand like how their mind works.
Actually, what was the key skill set that you actually had? I know we introduced in the beginning, but can you kind of showcase for us some of the skills that you think anyway definitely got you hired into your role now as a product manager? Like what does it take to pivot from the Army into product management at an organization that's industry leading like Primer?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, product management's a pretty broad role because it breaks into two different roles. You have like a product manager that works on like physical products and doesn't really have a technical background, maybe from more of a marketing side or design side. Okay. And then you have the product manager technical, which now you understand like whatever product you're building, you understand the basics of what's going on under the hood. You can flow across into design, into marketing, to sales. Like you have like a lot of different things that you can bring to the table. In terms of like translatable experience, I was like lucky. I switched to a functional area after my 5 years. So I was field artillery officer. And then after 5 years, an opportunity opened up to switch to a functional area called information systems engineer. 26 Bravo is the MOS or whatever. Okay. And I did 2 years in Hawaii where we were developing web applications, at the highest levels across the Pacific. And that was directly translatable because right now I'm a product manager for a web application. And, I learned all the languages, all the skills that, that goes into this. So that was directly related experience for 2 years. And then back at West Point, there was a lot of projects that I undertook with seniors. And then inside of my classes that I taught in GIS, I taught a lot of applying what we're learning. So like actually doing projects and creating those products that are used at higher levels. One of them was like the SHARP project, the SHARP project we did. Some projects for the diversity office. And a lot of those were directly translatable because I went out of my way to do things that kind of staged me for, hey, this is something that translates versus just doing map making in GIS. Like, taking that one step further, just trying a little bit more to make it so it's directly translatable.
No, that makes perfect sense. And were you, I don't even know if they have management information systems as a major at the academy, but where did you even pick up your skills other than self-taught and kind of going out of your way to, did you come from a tech background in the first place in terms of academia and whatever, or
No,
cold
I
turkey
already
just
did.
decided to go into tech?
Yeah, no, I did the computer science, like engineering, the track or whatever it's called.
Gotcha.
So that was my
Okay.
only small exposure. And then, the two classes, the IT classes that you take at West Point. So it was very
Yeah,
limited.
that I probably
exposure.
failed.
Yeah.
I
No,
didn't pay attention.
Yeah, no, I liked them, but I didn't like them enough to like focus into computer science. So I was like, I don't know if I was interested. But I did a nice web application when I left, like right before I left West Point, with Colonel Cook, who's still at West Point as a civilian instructor now, in the EECS department. We did a project we created a web application for allocating the tickets for the football team, like per game, like based off the number of tickets they get, who's traveling versus like, on the B squad team, they get a certain amount of tickets and they can assign them to their parents or whatever. So that was like my first ever application that I made. And then from there, I did a lot on the side, like just learning, always that constant learning thing, like going after your passions. So I did some stuff on the side around Fort Hood. So I was near Austin and I went to like all the startup stuff. And that's where I really, got my feet wet with things that are like not on paper. Yeah. And then it was like a natural progression where I was thinking of getting out at the 5 years. And someone was telling me about tuition assistance, like that program that you can use while you're serving. Yeah. And I was like, shoot, there was a new Texas A&M campus that they built like right outside of Fort Hood. And I just went there for nights and weekends, did an information systems degree, like an MS. And I was like, I used tuition assistance. It paid like 75%, owed like nothing back to the military. And
wow. So before you transitioned, you already had your degree in tow.
Yeah.
Not bad. That's what you call stick-to-itiveness.
Yeah, well, that was like at 5. So I got that in 2015. But doing that opened up the opportunity for the function area where like, or if you don't know the function areas, you typically have to apply and like wait. This was like, hey, you already have everything we want. If you want to come, you can come. And I was literally diverted from going to Fort Sill to Fort Gordon. And it was because of doing this. Like, again, like we mentioned those things of maybe taking that extra, just a little bit above and beyond your comfort zone. Yeah. And it's paid off dividends like throughout so far my little journey.
So what kind of skills, let's talk skills to be a product manager. Give me a few tidbits about, I don't really do the tech speak. So are we talking about Python, R, this, C++, all these things that my sister, she's a tech recruiter at Kforce, like one of the big tech staffing firms. What are the skills? What are we talking about here? Like, what would I need to know how to do in order to pivot a year from now into product management at Primer? Just curious for folks who are interested in this field as well.
Yeah, I would say just basic. So if you're a product manager for like a web application, basic web technologies. So at a high level, doing like system design architectures, knowing like, okay, you have a request from a client that hits a server. It's served, right? These are the type of requests that come back. Maybe a little bit of JSON, understanding like the payload that would come back. HTML, CSS, right? Basic web technology. Yeah. At least some knowledge of relational databases or any NoSQL databases. You're not doing hands on the keyboard per se. Just like in the military, you're not really like the soldier. You just understand like what they're doing when they PMCS their vehicles. You're not doing the PMCS personally, but you understand it enough where if you saw them doing something and they're like, well, why is that taking you, 3 hours to do? So the same thing translates to tech where people are talking about, we're trying to stand up this new Postgres database for us to save our user feedback. And we think it's going to take 5 people 2 months. And for you, like that should ring a bell. Like, there's no way. Why is it taking that long? So again, just having that knowledge of at least the basics. Like, okay, at least to be able to question them. Like, hey, is that really, or did we consider some other technical routes? Maybe Postgres isn't the best option. Like, what else have we considered? It's just asking, I think, those questions. Okay. And seeing like you kind of look like you've read up on things. That's probably like the basics. I would say any programming language, you don't have to know it. But again, if you just have basic knowledge of how things work and are intertwined and talk to each other, I think that's like as far as you have to go down. Then you have like the business side of, which I think everyone's good as far as a grad, like being able to talk to people, the status reports, making sure the team is aligned and focused on priorities. Like those, I think all military skills would be that side. The side that grads, I think, are disadvantaged at is the side I was mainly talking about. The other stuff, we kill it. Like no one can compare to us for this other piece of it, the business side, where we haven't sold to external partners, but you can dig back in your experience and know like, I did have to convince our commander to do this, and that took a lot of convincing, and you had to deal with a boss that was very confrontational, didn't see eye to eye with you. How did you manage that? So I think all those skills that you bring from the military would give you that level up. It's just taking that extra mile to at least get on level with your peers outside of the military for that technical piece. Then that's when you separate yourself.
Okay, no, that makes perfect sense. And to that point, what would be some of your, top 3 recommendations? Because you mentioned a few programs like Breakline and all that, but they're not going to teach you how to code. They're not going to teach you how to do this, this, and this. So, I heard degree, you might want to look into gaining that at least academic orientation and familiarity with that side of the house. But then I hear Google is leading the charge with maybe not looking at academia as the key decision maker to see what do you have. So what recommendations do you have again? So what would you advise me or any other grad who's looking to pivot into the space to kind of make up for some of those potential gaps that they might have, and maybe they weren't in a functional area like you, in information systems?
Yeah, I did also. I mentioned a lot of side things like the startup stuff. I did hackathons also. So really side projects, hackathons, because those are tangible things that you can say, I don't have this on paper, but look at this project that I made. You can check out my GitHub repo. I actually contribute and write code. It's not the best, and I don't think it's good at all either. I'm not here to tell you I'm a programmer. I'm just here to tell you that, hey, I'm actually gotten my feet wet and dove in and try to figure some of this stuff out. Okay. I think just doing that, it gives you at least something that's not on paper. You can point to it and say, here's my portfolio, if you will, of cool little pet projects that I just was curious, and I just wanted to learn how do I set up a basic note-taking application or a task tracker, right? A lot of things that I got lucky to do in the military, but again, if there's something that bothers you and you want to learn, web development, you can just say I'm just going to make a website that would automate this, or even inside, you're an XO or something. Yep. That's where it started for me, was when I just started developing. It sounds basic, but just doing a lot of basic macros inside of Excel. That is programming at the very basic level, right? You're automating things for reporting for your commander. He wants to know how much money we have in shortages, right? We have systems that do that, but it's not to the level of sometimes what your commander wants. So then you need a way to export that data and finagle it, do some data science, data wrangling, making sure it's in the right format that your commander wants it. And then writing a little bit of script or Googling online, hey, I was wondering, how do I set up this validation thing? And just doing those small, stupid things that just sets you above, right? Than your peers.
No, honestly, everything what you're saying right now, especially that last part, how to get something to some key stakeholder that, at the viewpoint or at the level that they need. Hell, I'm doing that right now, trying to learn from my teammate because he's the Excel guru, but I'm not. I look at numbers and I feel nauseous, legit nauseous, but I have to rely on him. But at the same time, let's say he's out of office. I have to go on Google and figure that out. But that is a great point that you make. You can find opportunities to, again, get into the space, or at least get into the mindset, so you can at least begin asking the right questions, the same questions you're going to ask of any key stakeholder once you're on the outside in the civilian world. So that's legit advice right there that I can at least attest to is actually legit and good to know. Thanks, Anise, for kind of giving us this really cool insight, a lot of great tips, and you're perhaps one of the few as opposed to the many in this particular transition that you've made. We've got a tech fair coming up. And there are a lot of employers looking for people like you, but not every grad necessarily would have had the same opportunities you did to make this pivot. I'm not going to say it's easy, but you definitely have a leg up on the competition, right? Or other grads maybe in the same boat. Now that you're there, you're in primer. Do you feel confident that you had the tools to make a successful job search?
Yeah, in the future, right? I mean, going forward, yeah, I think it's going to be a lot easier. Not just because, like, from what I heard from other grads, like where they said, once you do that first job, you kind of limit that risk. I go back to the risk of like this Army person coming out, the risk is like this versus now they've been at a company for 2 or 3 years, kind of some of those risks that we thought they possessed, like being super direct and like too harsh, whatever their biases are, right?
Yeah.
Maybe those have kind of washed away.
Yeah.
And now I feel comfortable hiring this, the risk is lower. So yeah, in that perspective, I feel more confident because I know I'm not going to be looked at as like, oh, this Army guy. And then the other piece, like, yeah, I know, like, if I did want to search for a job in, 1 or 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, I know like how to go about it and the resources that are available. So I think it'd be a lot easier just because I'd be comfortable with the approach and, I've done it before, now you're doing it. It's just repeating, right? It's not like this is something entirely new. You're just doing something that you figured out what works for you. And you're just going to have to try to replicate it again for the next.
No, that makes perfect sense. And man, you brought up a very good point about the distinction between a brand new transitioning service member and someone who's gone out, got a little bit of industry experience, and how employers look at you a lot different. And I can attest to that literally 10, 15 times over in my own experiences with working with other grads and even personally, that we do present a risk and we do have to be mindful of how employers think, going back to knowing your audience a little bit more. And you expanded on that earlier. So that is a fantastic point that I really hope everybody pays attention to. I'm going to make actually as much fuss about it in the actual thing as I am now, because it's so freaking important. Congratulations on everything. Now that you know a little bit more about career services and having worked with us, even if it's only a little or a lot, would you recommend career services to other grads? And if so, why?
Yes. Definitely I would recommend it. I go back to don't leave any leaf unturned, right? Like if there's an opportunity out there that will help you, take advantage of it. Everyone, the career team's there to help you out. They're not there to, to make money off of you or to lead you the wrong direction. It's in their best interest to help you. So that's like the first thing I want to put out there. And then in general, like I can attest to, Julia connected me with Sarah over at Neuro. And although we didn't find a fit right now, with finding a job in general, there's a lot of things that have to happen. The stars have to align, it has to be a full moon, whatever. Yeah. So there's a lot that has to happen. But now I have that connection with Sarah. She actually, I was texting her throughout my process, like with other companies, even through negotiations. Like she was still helping me, even though it didn't matter for her, right? It's at a totally different company. She was giving me a lot of advice on which companies I should look at. And I know in the future, if I get, like, say in 2 or 3 years from now, going back to that job search thing, I know in the future I can definitely reach out to her. And she's like, yeah, I know Anis. We have this strong relationship. He was 2 or 3 years at this other AI company. We do the same thing over here at Neuro. Like, I can definitely vouch for him and I feel comfortable vouching for him. So I think it's not only the short game. It's also, there's other things down the line that you want to keep those, back to networking. You want to keep those open because you never know when you're going to look for that next job.
Man, I need you to say that like one more time, honestly, just to like really dig into why networking is so great. And, that's what we say here at AOG. I mean, that's how we kind of look at our role in career services. It's facilitating the connections across the most connected alumni body in the whole world. I mean, that's literally our vision, and you're a proof of concept that it works and you can do it again, no matter, if it's your first transition or subsequent transitions. Anis, I want to really, first of all, congratulate you on the pivot and really appreciate taking your time to kind of share some very, very sage advice here on how to do end-to-end, very comprehensive, holistic job search. Honestly, you really did not leave any stone unturned. So kudos to you for making it happen. I mean, this was all your heavy lifting, and you can definitely tell that not only that you got the job, but you really share some really good advice that really shows just really how much work and effort it takes, and very realistic approach and in terms of expectations and how to manage your expectations through this. So just want to wrap things up and offer you the opportunity to share any final words you have with grads and so on. Yeah, all yours. Mike is yours.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, no, I really appreciate, spending the time. I look forward to sharing as much with others, and where I can, right? I think it's very important to give back. There's a lot of people that did reach their hand out, even though it didn't directly help me. It did help me in ways to prepare as I was moving forward. So, again, I keep hitting on this, but if there's an option out there that might help you, you might as well explore it, because you never know if that might be the path that you're supposed to be on that will get you to that, that next thing, which is the job ultimately. And, the last words kind of in closing is it's up to you. It's just like in the military. It's on you to manage your career. You can either be told by people, here's your next job, or you can go out and find your next job, right? And it applies in the civilian world too. So there's a lot of heavy lifting that you're going to have to do on your own. Don't rely on others to kind of reach out. It's good to have that, that ability to reach out to other grads, but they're busy. They're doing their own jobs. They're trying to move up in their own world too. So it's tough to expect them to just lay over backwards and just hand you a freebie, right? Especially when a lot of them went through the same pain of, trying to work through things and figure it out. They love to help you, but sometimes they just don't have that time. So you also have to do stuff on your own. And then really just closing, if it doesn't make sense and you're not being forced out, medically discharged, whatever, if you still have the opportunity to stay in the military and serve, if that's the best thing for you and your family, or if it doesn't apply to your family, just you personally, then do that. There's no one telling you, hey, you have to get out. There's this light at the end of the tunnel. If you love what you're doing in the military, there's no point to leave. Or if you think, you hate it and you think you've staged yourself, you're ready to get out, then make the transition. Just don't make any decisions if you're not completely ready.
All right. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Anise, Merzi, class of 11 or 14? I can't remember. 11.
11, yeah.
There you go.
Thank you again to both Julia and Anise for sharing their connection, and what turned out to be a successful job search. Just last year alone, the career team helped over 200 old grads transition with job placements. Let's jump into another success story with a class of 1980 graduate Miguel Gutierrez, an assistant director of career services at the AOG, and a 2018 grad, Hannah Dahlem.
Hello, everyone. My name is Miguel Gutierrez. I am from the West Point Association of Graduates Career Services team, and I'm honored today to speak with Hannah Dahlem, who's class of 18, Cadet Company F3. She branched Adjutant General Corps, and her current role is as a project manager with Index AR Solutions in Williamsburg, Virginia. So with that, I want to welcome Hannah. So Hannah, please tell us a little bit about your current role and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me on today. So as you said, I am currently a project manager for Index AR Solutions in Williamsburg, Virginia. We develop interactive ebooks and augmented reality mobile applications, mostly for large utilities, and they assist with training and performing jobs in the field. I absolutely love working here. They place such an emphasis on servant leadership. My CEO, Dan Arzinski, class of 78, has worked really hard to establish that servant leadership in our work culture. Our mission is people first, and we help workers with their jobs and safety. So definitely a wonderful place for a West Pointer to be at. And we already have 3 West Pointers here at the company.
Hannah, thank you. So I'd like to start off with asking you a couple of questions about your path and how you got to where you are today. So let's start off with, how did you first learn about the West Point Association of Graduates Career Services team?
I learned about AOG Career Services through a friend, Molly Prin's class of 2017. When I was in my job search, she mentioned that our career services team was phenomenal. So I looked into it.
Excellent. So did you reach out to the career services team while you were still on active duty or afterwards?
I reached out to career services after I transitioned out of the Army to change my career path. Immediately after the Army, I did start going to grad school for my MBA. I began working for a tennis not-for-profit, and I oversaw and taught At the Special Olympics, I ran a tennis program for underserved youth, and I managed wheelchair tennis. I was doing that for about a year, and then I began my job search in the beginning of 2020. I knew I wanted to find a career that I was passionate about and where I could help others like I had been doing, but I wanted to be closer to my family. So I reached out to career services and they guided me in the right direction.
So when you were getting out of the military, when you were transitioning, I know you went to graduate school, like you said, after you left, but as you were transitioning out, what were some of the concerns that you had about this next step in your life?
I guess my biggest concern about transitioning would be that I lacked experience. I was worried that I would end up in a career path that I wasn't passionate about as well. I knew I wanted to do something meaningful. And again, like I said, help others, which I'm proud to say that I am currently doing.
And then so when you finally decided after graduate school and working for the nonprofit and you wanted to reach out to career services, did you have any sort of expectations on how they could assist you, what resources they had for you, or any idea at all?
Mm-hmm. Some of my expectations were that career services would maybe help me with resume building, give me any advice or tips on interviewing, give me advice for networking with old grads and careers or companies that I was interested in, maybe help me find some mentors or other guidance. All these expectations turned out to be true.
Excellent. So then once you started working with career services, what is it about working with them that surprised you the most about the types of resources that were made available to you?
What surprised me the most was that career services team, they cared so much about placing me in a position or career path that was perfect for me.
And so then what would you say, having worked with them and then just interacting with other grads, what would you say was the single most valuable piece of advice you received during transition?
The best piece of advice that I received during my transition was to reach out to as many people as possible, especially old grads, other service members. It's so important to network, especially with people at companies or in industries that you are interested in. So don't just apply blindly to jobs. 99% of the time, your resume is just going into a black hole. When you network, you can build connections, learn more about their specific role, and potentially receive referrals from within the company you are interested in, which definitely gives you a significant advantage.
So after all these positive interactions with career services and the recommendations and the training you got, which led to you being successful in your job search, would you as a grad recommend career services to other grads? And if so, what would be the overriding reason?
Of course. So I definitely would recommend career services to other grads because, again, they're so dedicated to making sure grads are successful in their job search. They're an excellent resource, so many connections. Without career services, I may not have known about the role at Index AR Solutions.
So let's talk a little bit about that role at Index AR Solutions. Could you go into a little bit more detail, perhaps, on how did you find the job there? Was it through networking? Was it through the job board? Obviously, you mentioned something a little bit about you might not have found it if it hadn't been career services. How did you get connected to this opportunity at Index AR?
I found the job I'm currently in because at the same time that I had reached out to career services, the CEO of Index AR Solutions, Dan Arzinski, had reached out to identify grads to hire. Career services connected us. I spoke with Dan, learned more about the company. He referred me to the interview process, and the rest is history. And I just want to add that when you do reach out to career services, they are networked with top organizations, and you often speak to very senior level individuals, old grads with very impressive backgrounds like Dan. So the very first individual I did connect with was the CEO, which is pretty rare. So it's so important that you are professional, transparent. For example, if you do decide to go with another job offer, make sure to update any other companies you may also have offers from or or in the middle of an interview process with. If you aren't professional, you could be burning bridges not only for yourself, but for future West Pointers. You have a responsibility to represent West Point in the best way possible.
That's a great response. So now that you've had all this training, you've been into a job, you've worked with career services, do you feel confident that you now have the tools, in your toolkit to successfully conduct a job search in the future, should you need to? Because we know in today's society, through forces outside of your control, could impact your career. Do you feel that you're confident that because of the training you received with career services, that you could do an effective and confident job search in the future?
I do feel very confident that I now have the tools to be successful in conducting a job search. I have peace of mind knowing that career services is always there for support. Their resources, training, and guidance prove to be invaluable in establishing confidence for future job searches. So I would definitely be less anxious about it.
And so in kind of wrapping this up a little bit, if you could give a single piece of advice to a graduate who will be transitioning from the military, or perhaps is even already in civilian life or in grad school and is going to be looking for a job in the future, what would be some advice you would give to those fellow graduates?
My single piece of advice would be similar to the advice that I had received. Network, contact West Point AOG Career Services as soon as possible when you're considering transitioning. The sooner the better. Attend Service Academy career conferences. There's so many great opportunities there. I also want to add that you should be grateful that you have this resource. West Point has one of the best, if not the best, network in the world. And do not take that for granted. Represent West Point in the most professional way possible. Again, be transparent and be respectful to employers and the people that you're connecting with.
Well, Hannah, I really want to thank you for giving up time from your busy schedule to join us today on this podcast. And do you have any final words that you'd like to give out to graduates, or if a graduate is out there is interested in communicating with you, to pick your brain, so to say, can they contact you? And if so, how?
Yeah, so please reach out to me if you need any advice on working with West Point AOG Career Services. You can contact me on LinkedIn. I'm also willing to network, mentor any grads transitioning, or just speak with any grads that may be interested in Index AR solutions. We are hiring for technical writers who not only write, but they essentially act as project managers within the writing process. They're also producers, etc. We also have positions for project managers, relationship managers, etc. So again, please reach out if you want to learn more about us. There are incredible opportunities to wear so many different hats here and make a difference helping other people.
All right, Hannah. Well, I appreciate it. Once again, thank you for joining us on this podcast. And to everyone out there, if you're transitioning or you know another grad who's having troubles finding a new job opportunity, please have them reach out to the West Point Association of Graduates Career Services team. We're here to help you, and our services are free. Thank you.
We are happy to see our Career Services Department helping members of the Long Gray Line navigate life after the Academy. Since the Careers program was launched in 2019, 483 alumni have pivoted to new jobs with the help of their services. We will continue to follow transitioning grads on their life journey, and please don't hesitate to contact the AOG for help with your next employment opportunity.
Hi, my name is Julia Ruddock, class of 07, and Director of Career Services at the West Point Association of Graduates. On Friday, June 25th, West Point AOG is offering our first ever industry-focused career fair from noon to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, featuring all things technology. If you're looking for a new job in technology or want to hire a grad, register for free today by visiting WPAOGcareers.org or call our career services team at 845-446-1618. Sponsored by Tracer Franchising, this event is open to all grads and is a great opportunity to find or change to a new job, learn from experts in the tech space, and expand your network across the industry. See you at the fair.
Once again, we thank you for listening to the WPAOG Podcast, which is available to stream online directly to your mobile device at any time, any place in the world. Just search WPAOG Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe to the show for new monthly episodes. Go Army!